2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode as we start the Christmas month. And I'm back here with my Croatian friend. Has it been snowing over in your area?
Well, actually not quite yet, but it has gotten quite cold, but we haven't had snow yet. What about you?
I know that I spoke to a friend of mine in Finland, and he said it snowed where he was. So I know on that side of the world,
Oh,
somewhere it's snowing. Here it's only sleeted just a little bit. But today we are going to go on about a film that has become a cult Christmas classic. That was filmed in 1946, if I remember correctly. Yep, and it was directed by Frank Capra, with the right with Frank Capra, Francis Goodrich, and Albert Hackett as writing the screenplay for the sucker. And it stars James Stewart and Donna Reed as George Bailey and Mary Hatch. But let us see what IMDb says about the film before we go into our first impressions.
okay.
And I happen to have a copy of the film, although I know it comes on every year. It is one of my favorite films of Jimmy Stewart's filmography. It's called "It's a Wonderful
Nice.
Life." And before I get too much into the IMDb info that we have here. It's a Wonderful Life is based on a short story or booklet called The Greatest Gift, which was written by Philip Van Dorn, and apparently he was inspired by a dream that was evidently reminiscent of Charles Dickens' novella A Christmas Story. Apparently, he wrote a 4,000 word short story, which he called The Greatest Gift, and he began it in 1939 and finished it in 1943. But he was unable to find a publisher for it at the time. He sent 200 printed copies to friends as Christmas cards in December 1943. His daughter, Margaret Stern Robinson, recalled, "I was in the 3rd grade and remembered delivering a few of these cards to my teachers and my friends. My father, who was himself from a mixed religious background, explained to me that while the story takes place at Christmas time, and that we were sending it as a Christmas card to our friends, it is a universal story for all people in all times." Apparently, the story was published as a book in December of 1944 with illustrations by Raffaello Busoni. Stern then sold it to Reader's Scope magazine, which published it in its December 1944 issue, and to the magazine Good Housekeeping, which published it under the title The Man Who Was Never Born in its 1945 January issue, published in December 1944. A small edition was produced in 1996 and yet another in 2011.
Wow.
Apparently, Stern is to have said in a 1946 interview that Bedford Falls had been modeled on Califon, New Jersey. One of those pamphlets came to the attention of RKO Pictures producer David Hampstead, who showed it to actor Cary Grant, who became interested in playing the lead role at the time. But RKO purchased the motion picture rights for $10,000 in April 1944, and after several screenwriters worked on adaptations, RKO sold the rights to the story in 1945 to Frank Capra's production company, Liberty Films, for the same $10,000. Capra adapted the story to It's a Wonderful Life in 1946. Evidently, in December of 1946, James Stewart, who played George Bailey in the film, wrote to Van Doren Stern, calling the story an inspiration to everyone concerned with the picture. The fundamental story was so sound and right. But let us go over to IMDb and what they tell us. An angel is sent from heaven to help a desperately frustrated businessman, to show him what life would have been like if he had never existed. So, first impressions here. Was this a first time watch for you or no?
Well, yes and no. I have yes, today was my first time watching it, but I watched it twice. Earlier, I watched it alone, and now with you again. Earlier, I watched the colored version, and now your black and white version with you. uh,
Well, the colored
y-
version, I believe, came later. I originally saw it in black and white, so I purchased it in black and white, I believe. I believe the colorized version is here too. I think on the second disc, but
oh,
I prefer
ooh.
the black and white.
Uh, yeah, I understand. So, my first impressions. One interesting thing
I guess it was a
from what.
first for both versions. I guess for you. So you saw the colorized version and the black and white in the same day. That is a feat.
Yes, yeah, yeah, I did. I pretty much liked the movie. Maybe one thing that I kind of had an issue with the first time I was watching it is that it felt like some scenes were dragging out a bit too long. But now, after I saw it for the second time, it's rather interesting to notice how all those things that didn't seem too relevant was watching it for the
Didn't see,
first time. The second time I went, I'm sorry.
didn't see the first time. You see the second time because to me, I I feel like this is a movie that every time I see it, I see something different every time.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is there were some scenes that while I was watching it for the first time didn't seem too relevant, but now when I know how the movie ends and what happens later, I realized how those scenes that originally didn't seem too relevant actually do come into play later, which was very interesting to notice.
Okay.
Uh,
And what do you think? I mean, what did you think about the film as a whole? I know you liked it, and we know what you didn't like, but what did you think
uh,
about it as a whole?
Well, as a whole, it was definitely interesting. As you may know, I usually like stories about angels and stuff like that. Well, also about demons, but that's not for today. uh,
No, in fact,
uh,
this is definitely a film for the angels,
yeah.
if you really want to put it that way. There is
Yeah.
always a good side to the evil side, even though we want to be evil.
Yeah, well, now that you mentioned it, well, spoiler alert, another thing that maybe I think should have been different, the bad guy in the movie, we never get to see him receive any comeuppance for all the bad things he did. But other than that, it was a pretty nice story. Yeah, I liked it.
I know the first time I saw this film, I was very young, and I've seen it every Christmas since. And over time, I mean, at first it was like one of those films that my parents would put on, and I just wouldn't pay attention to it. But over time, it is a film that have come to know, enjoy, and love, especially since enjoy films that are in black and white over color, even though I know this eventually was put into Technicolor. I still prefer watching the black and white over the color aspect because of the. And I like the fact that reading up on this film, actually reading up on it, that they mention um, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, or at least Charles Dickens himself, because Charles Dickens was very bleak at times, and there are moments in this film where it does become very bleak and very Dickensian in a retrospect because of the times that it portrays in the background of this film. I mean, you have it going through the Depression, you have it going through a war or two. I mean, but this kind of goes to show you a little bit of what happens in the town of Bedford Falls. Um, I mean, while these other times seem to be happening around them, but we are not necessarily introduced to George Bailey right away. George Bailey, though he is the main character of the film, we see it through the eyes of an angel of the Lord up in heaven, because he,
Yeah,
in the very beginning, and this is something that I don't think I paid attention to at first. I didn't pay attention to all the prayers that the people were offering in the very beginning, and in a way, in a sense, that is kind of haunting in the very beginning when you hear them say their prayers for George, and then all of a sudden you see these the stars in the sky, the stars in the sky or space or the universe, and you see a couple of twinkling things talk to each other. What did you think about that very beginning?
well, that was pretty interesting, and I would say, as far as I have seen by now, a pretty unique way to portray some heavenly figures interacting with each other. So those three top stars was supposed to be Clarence, this angel, then Joseph. I guess Jesus, a stepfather, and God Himself, right? Uh,
Quite possibly. I mean, it's never quite known who that person is behind the Iron Curtain there. Uh, but sorry, that was a Soviet joke, anyways.
I
Uh,
understood.
but we have a couple of angels that appear to be talking to each other, and they realize that there is a situation with one of the people down on Earth, and it just so happens to be George Bailey. And in order to tell us the story, they tell us much of it through the eyes of an angel, second class, um,
Yeah,
by the name of Clarence, which we only hear by name. Which, to me, honestly, you kind of have to have a couple of people who have some really good voices, so that you can pay attention to these voices without hearing them. At least at first, because you're not seeing any of these heavenly beings, you're listening to them. So I think
yeah,
that's a different aspect of the film. and a different perspective of narrative. To be honest, it's almost like a third
Well,
person narrative.
yeah, well, good point. I guess I have seen a few movies with a narrator in the background, but yeah.
But in the first scene that Clarence is shown is a moment when George Bailey was very young. He was just a kid, and um, you see him with a bunch of his friends, including his brother, and they're all going tobogganing down a hill or sledding down a hill onto what looks like a pond or a small lake. And what happens here?
Oh, his brother Harry, the ice cracks under him from what I remember, and he almost drowns. And George saves his life, but at that moment, George catches a really bad cold and gets an ear infection, which leaves him deaf on one ear.
Hmm. So that's the first bad thing that kind of happens to him. But I mean, this is a man who has to go through a lot of setbacks, and sometimes that happens in life. Sometimes
Mm.
when you think life is going really grand, life gives you a kick in the shitter, and it basically tells you, "Hey, buddy, that's not the life that I want you to live," kind of a thing. And that's kind of what George kind of goes through. But you see his early beginnings here, because shortly after that incident, um, you see the two ladies in his life. And you also get a sense of who he is as a person, as we learn that he is working for a drugstore owner who has just lost his son.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
what happened here?
Oh, well, that was a pretty intense scene. When George was supposed to take some medications that this old man prepared for someone who ordered them, George saw a piece of paper where he found out that the man's son had recently died, and he also saw a bottle of poison and realized that his boss had accidentally put some poison into the medications. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to go and talk to his father to ask him what he should do, but the father didn't have time to talk to him. And
And the
eventually
reason,
he.
and actually, just going to take a moment and talk about that section for a moment before we get back to that other serious moment. The reason why his father isn't able to talk at the moment is because this is where we meet the more um, evil man in town who apparently seems to own much of Bedford and just keeps buying and buying, and he's putting all kinds of stress on his dad, because he, he has something that he wants and he's just not giving it to him. And this is one of many uh, instigated conversations that apparently his father has had with this man. This man is uh, Mr. Potter. I believe that's
Yes.
his name, and Mr. Potter is played by Lionel Barrymore. um, and what do you think of Mr. Potter?
I'm sorry, I had a sound glitch. Could you please
What do you
repeat
think
what
of
you said?
Mr. Potter?
Well, I think he is pretty bad, and like I said earlier, for some reason we never see him receive any comeuppance for all the things he did, especially later on. Well, spoiler alert. When George's uncle accidentally leaves $8,000 at his place, he keeps it for himself and lets the Baileys deal with the issues.
Well,
It will cross them.
not only that, but during the Depression later on, he buys up the bank, and he also tries to buy George Bailey later on too. So it's like this guy seems to have money to throw around anywhere where he pleases, and yet he goes around like a miser. You know what a miser is?
Actually, no. I'm sorry. You know, English is not my first language, so yeah, that's a word I'm not familiar with.
Well, a miser is someone is a person who is reluctant to spend, sometimes to the point of forgoing even basic comforts and some necessities in order to hoard money or other possessions. Um,
Oh,
Although the word is sometimes used loosely to characterize anyone who is mean with their money, if such behavior is not accompanied by taking delight in what is saved, it is not properly miserly. Misers, as a type, have never been a perennial object of popular fascination and a fruitful source for writers and artists in many cultures. But that brings kind of me back to the Charles Dickens A Christmas Carol, because in there we also have a miser
oh yeah,
in Mr. Scrooge, which to me, Mr. Potter is kind of a Scroogey like character. So that in
definitely.
act- that in actuality is kind of what I kind of look at it. I don't know if you do.
Well, I do see the similarities, yeah.
But in any case, moving back to Mr. Gower, what happened there?
Oh, so yeah, as George couldn't get any advice from anyone on what to do with those poisoned pills, he eventually didn't deliver them. And when Mr. Gower found out, at first he freaked out and started to slap George, which kind of put me off the first time I saw it, I must admit, but. I guess at the time when the movie was made, that wasn't so uncommon, I believe.
Well, the man had just lost his own son.
Uh,
So, and during evidently a war, he'd actually been sent a telegraph that his son had died. So um, he hadn't grieved yet. And I think in the in the wake of his sorrow for his son, he was still trying to take the news in. And so all the distractions of the drugstore, and even though he's got to, when he makes the medication, he's got to be spot on. He can't mess up or anything like that. I mean, you could tell that he was kind of a drug store that where he actually made the drugs himself. He
yes.
mixed a powder here or a powder there, put it in a capsule, and he's because he was a local drugstore in town, he just had a errand boy send it to whoever needed the medication that moment. And he was probably the only general store in town that sold drugs for the people of Bedford Falls. So him being the only drugstore in town, possibly, because I didn't see any other one, at least
Yeah.
not that we know of. Um, he's it. He's who everyone goes to do, gives their prescription to, and be like, okay, here, I need some penicillin. Uh, but he he mixed the two up, and the boy noticed it. So um, that shows to me the kind of character that George Bailey is. A good, honest young kid, even though he can look like he's a little bit. I mean, when he was talking to the little girls nearby him, especially little Mary,
Mm.
he made a comment to her that hey, I'm going to marry, have like four wives or something like that. I'm going to see the world, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah, he said something like that.
we see a little something there with Mary's character too, because she leans down, whispers in his deaf ear, and says, "I love you, George Bailey. I'll love you till the day you die."
Yeah, well, that's really proven true later on.
What do you think of little Violet's character?
Well, she was a funny one. I guess she was kind of intended to be portrayed as a not very good woman, but I found her rather amusing. I think she's not really as bad as they try to make her seem.
No, she definitely wasn't, and she was definitely an interesting character. I mean, she looks like she might have been like a popular girl, even that young, and she went out with all the boys. And the thing is, I think she had a partialness to hitting on George Bailey, and I think that is proven even later on, when uh, he runs into her, and before he even meets up with Mary, um, he runs into her, and she drops the two guys that she's talking to, and she walks over and talks to George Bailey, and he's kind of drunk, and or at least somewhat. Uh, and this is after that party that is for his brother's graduation, which we'll get to. um, he basically says the most wildest thing. He's like, "Why don't we take off our shoes, walk up the mountain, take and put our bare feet into the lake right after that mountain, and
Uh,
we'll, he basically tells her all this romantic stuff, and she's like, "Wait a minute, buddy, that mountain is like 20 miles away." you know. But let's talk about, okay. Well, we do see a little bit of his family, and we do see a little bit about his father too. Um, so this is when George is George wants to get out of town. He wants to get out of Dodge. He wants to now that he's done with college, he's ready to travel the world, leave Bedford Falls. And his father asks him to if he'd think about sticking around. What do you think about that moment?
Whew, well, uh, that's an interesting moment. It kind of makes me think. I personally would probably prefer to stay because I'm a person who has a hard time adjusting to a new environment and things like that. But yeah, for someone who actually dreamed of moving out and doing all kinds of different things from what he could do there. I kind of see why that would be a difficult situation, but
Mo- Most assuredly. What do you think about? And to me, I've always felt like George was the more level-headed person, son in the family. I mean, his father made a comment to me that kind of stuck out. You were born old, George.
yeah.
So to me, that comment kind of stuck with me as far as George is concerned. He does kind of feel. I mean, he does kind of. I mean, he has to grow up like really fast. I mean, as when it comes to having to come back and take care of his father's stuff after in a little bit. But I like the fact that they do kind of show this moment in time where okay, is his younger brother. What do you think of his younger brother Harry at this moment?
Well, actually, well, we did get to see him for a little bit, but not that much throughout the whole movie. Well, he seemed fine, but I guess we didn't really get to know him too well.
Well, not too much, but I don't really think you need to entirely know him too much. Only to know that he eventually became the war hero that we know him to
Oh,
be. And he was willing to come back and like work and take George Bailey's place. But I think George knew um, exactly what his brother needed since he was offered a job with his new wife, wifey to be, or wifey, the surprise wife. Hello, family. Say hello to the wife, the Mrs. Bailey.
yeah, so George was a bit conflicted because he kind of wanted his brother to take over the business, but then he didn't want to force him to do it when the brother wanted to do something else and something that would actually be better for him.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Uh,
The other person that I thought that was kind of interesting in the this whole thing was George's friend Sam Right, Ehaw, who was played by Frank Albertson. What did you think of him?
Uh, well, I kind of felt sorry for him. Like in a way, George took his romantic interest away, and Sam still helped him later on.
Oh, even though he had a cutie in the background while he was talking to him. I
Oh, oh,
don't,
I
I
forgot
don't,
that.
I don't think he would have missed her. That although he was, I mean, anyone who grew up in Bedford Falls seemed to be like very close to each other. It seems like that kind of town where everyone knew everything about anyone. You couldn't even take a shit unless someone neighbor saw you through the window, being like, "Hey, isn't that Irv? He's taking a shitter now. Come on, boy. Hey, come get a look at his wife. She's taking her bra off now."
I can kind of imagine something like that.
Oh, would you look at that? Hey, Marv, come over here. No, but in any case, it just kind of seems like that kind of a town, right? Where everybody knew everything about everybody, and you know what? Nobody really cared that they knew because they helped each other, even though things were down. But the thing is, there is that other side of town, that Potter is trying to hold on to. He's trying to hold on to his piece of the action. as far as business goes, and he doesn't give a hoot about you know the
Who?
struggling working class man, the working
Yeah,
class people.
yeah,
Whereas the Bailey building loan, they offer money, a loan, so that people can help themselves get out of the gutter from paying taxes on Potter's side of the field, and to able to own their own homes. And that's kind of what George Bailey is able to build. I mean, his father wasn't the one who made Bailey Park; it was him. It was George Bailey who started that park. His father, at one point, just did loans to help people out. But let's get back to the okay. So after the whole talk with his dad, with senior Bailey, um, he decides to go and join his brother at his graduation party, which just so happens to be at his old high school grounds. And he runs into to his old faculty teacher, and apparently there is a pool underneath the floor,
oh yeah.
the new floor. So what happened here?
Oh, so there was this one guy who I didn't quite understand what happened there, but from what I understood, the guy was jealous when George started to dance with Mary, so he tried to sabotage it. He pressed some button to make the floor open up and to get George to fall into the pool. And eventually, George and Mary both fell into the pool, but instead of it turning out embarrassing or anything, everyone loved it and started to jump after them.
And this is where I think this movie can change from being just a Christmas movie to like just your basic romantic movie, because shortly after that he's walking home in a what looks like a football jersey, and she's walking home in just a robe. You almost wonder what's underneath that. and Donna Reed, she is a beautiful young lady. I mean, supposedly at this moment in time, she's like 18 years old, and I know she's more in like her 20s to early 30s at this moment in her life, but
I,
she is beautiful. I mean,
yeah,
to me, she's kind of like the girl that you want to take home and take home to your mother. Uh,
pretty
um,
much, yes.
I mean, she is, but she's only got sights for George. Even though her mother seems to try to get her sights on Sam Rainwright because he's got the Hugo Bucks, you know. But she fell in love with him at a very early age, and it's because of the insistence of her brother at the graduation party that they even got together at all. And to be honest, he's kind of the one that kind of helped get them in the pool. But in any case, they're walking home somewhere in Bedford Falls. Is this old, dilapidated, rundown hotel where they both throw a rock into like a window, and it's not the same window. It's actually two different windows. He threw one in through the second story one, that little balcony looking thing, and then she threw one through one of the windows that's out front, and they both made a wish. And I like this little instance because she doesn't quite tell him. She's more of a tease. And she doesn't, because he keeps asking her, "What you wish for, Mary?" And I like this moment because it shows the romantic in him. He's like, "What do you want, Mary? What do you want?" You want the moon, Mary?
The,
How about that? I'll
oh
give you the moon.
yeah, the moon.
I'll give you the moon. And she's like, all right, I'll take it. And so that's why that becomes kind of a thing during their first couple of years, or at least when she comes back from college or whatnot, or because several years go by later, and you know he has to. His father has a heart attack, and so I think his father does indeed die, and
Yes.
he's still planning on leaving. He's still planning on trying to fly the coop. He's still trying to, get out from under Bedford Falls. But it's Potter, Mr. Potter, who seems to have nothing good to say about his father and the way he ran things. And he because he had to, and to tell you the truth, his uncle Billy was the one who was running it up until a certain. Well, actually, he would have been running it, but it's because of that instance. I mean, he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The board of committee, which Mr. Potter was now on, the board of committee wanted to shut that Bailey and loan down. They wanted to shut it down, and because of the argument that he gave to, Mr. Potter, calling him what was it? Did you call him a
What was
old
it?
whatever man?
I I think I can't remember it word by word, but yeah, I remember he told him off pretty well.
Yeah, he pretty much told him off, and the board liked that. And the fact is that they'll keep the building and loan open and running if George Bailey will run it. That's the clause, I mean, unfortunately,
Mm,
if not, then Potter's running it. So he had to take up the reins at least until, you know, um, until he didn't have to anymore. More, and even then, that's about the time when Mary came home from college, and his mother was kind of was that before or oh yeah, he's celebrating with his uncle Billy because of being able to take over the building and loan place out from and keeping it from Potter, and his mother tells him to go over and talk to Mary, and
yeah.
I like that part because a little bit before that, Uncle Billy, he's kind of a delectable, funny little drunk.
Indeed.
He gives him his hat, or he asks around, "Where's my hat?" And he takes his hat. George takes his hat off and holds it right side up for him. He's like, "Where's my hat? Is that my hat? Which one is it?" It's the one in the middle. And he takes the hat, walks, and then falls over, supposedly off camera somewhere. And ultimately, George Bailey decides that he's going to do some kissing, I guess. So, but he walks one way, and then he walks the totally different direction, and that's when he walks into Violet and that whole scenario where she was like, I'm not walking that 20 miles. And everybody's laughing and at the whole situation, and he's like, all right, forget it.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene. Like, at least as far as I understood it, he realized that she was into him, but she wasn't his type. So the best way to the best way to stop her without hurting her feelings too much would be inviting her to do something she would obviously hate to do.
Oh yeah. So ultimately, he ends up at outside the picket's fence in front of Barry's home. What do you think about this whole scenario here, where he has just arrived at the home and whatnot? And she calls to him, "What are you doing, picketing?"
Well, it was a pretty interesting scene. Like at first they ended up arguing. I forgot why exactly, but yeah, he ended up leaving. But he forgot something, and when he returned, she was in a phone call with Sam, from what I remember. And Sam wanted to talk to both of them at the same time, so they found themselves really close to each other, so that they both could talk on the phone. And when they found themselves so close to each other, they ended up kissing. And
Oh yeah, I mean that was the very the very beginning of at least his romantic relationship with her. Um, the way that they
yeah,
were so close to each other, and they weren't quite touching each other. That was an awkward moment, but it was also a touching moment because you could tell the chemistry was between them. Um,
yeah,
and
definitely.
um, ultimately, he's like, this is almost like where it comes to a hill because he's at the moment where he's not interested in a marriage. He's not interested in staying anywhere close to home, and yet he found love. I mean, in Mary. So that's kind of why he broke down. And then the next you see them both getting married, running down the chapel steps, and they're in the taxi with Ernie, and ultimately they show off the thousands of buckaroos that they are holding for their honeymoon, and he's like, "We're off to see the world, the Parthenon," and Ernie stops the taxi because he sees something that's happening at the bank. It seems that um, whatever's happening is that apparently people are wanting their money and the bank's closed. His bank and loan. So he tells Mary, "Hold on a moment. I'll be right back." So he goes over. He's calm. He goes in, and he's all professional because he invites everyone in, have a seat and everything. He's just that kind of a person. He's personable. He's just that kind of a person. He goes over, talks to Uncle Billy, and apparently the bank that Potter has now officially bought out, has called up the loan, and probably due to Potter's insistence, because he has now acquiesced the bank that they go to, which is another dent in the Potter Bailey war that's going on between them. Because it is kind of a war. It's a business war. It's okay.
yeah,
I'll loan the people money to get out of your slum shit, but I'll just keep on buying everything else, so that you have nothing else to do, and I'll just keep watching, waiting. And so for a moment, people are thinking that they won't bank there, and Potter, he kind of draws a line in a line in the sand, because he's offering people 50 cents on the dollar to come and bank over where he is, instead of going to this Bailey bank and loan place, and he's like, well, if you give in to him, then you're giving in to him. I mean, look what happened to you. You had to scrape every penny, every dollar, just to get out of the hole that you dug yourself in, didn't you? And that's what Potter did, things of that nature. And it just so happens that he has his honeymoon money sitting there. And at this point in time, money probably wasn't a whole lot. So he ended up having to take that $2,000 and dole out money to anyone who needed it at that point in time. This was the time of the Depression, Black Tuesday, where the stock markets crashed and everything. I mean, this was a time where nobody had money. No, I mean, you didn't even have cheese for the mouse. I mean, you just didn't have it. I mean, oftentimes your clothes would end up having rags and holes, and that's kind of how we got them suit coats with the patches on them. That came from the Depression era. Well, it happened in America. I know it didn't happen in your country. Maybe it happened at some point in time to you guys. But our country ran out of money, so he had to fork out the money out of his own pocket to help them out, which ultimately came into play later on, didn't it? Re-say what you're saying. I know I'm having kind of a blip here on my end.
I'm sorry, I had a glitch. What did you say?
I did too. That's what I was saying. Go back and say what you were going to say.
No, I just said you said that this situation with money was going to come into play later, and I said probably yes, but I can't remember exactly how.
Well, like Boris said earlier, spoiler alert, because we were going to spoil this movie anyways for you folks. So, but ultimately, what happens, and it's a pretty straightforward movie. I mean, basically, George Bailey has a day where his uncle Billy, who kind of helps run the joint for him, takes a money order to the bank, and because of this war in between Potter, he has to go and say something to Potter, but he accidentally leaves the money that he had in an envelope inside the newspaper that he had taken from Mr. Potter. And Potter realizes this, and he's a schmuck. He keeps the money. I mean, who but should go to jail but him? But there are no cameras to prove that at this point in time. And this time in the lives of the Baileys, he could have taken that money and gotten away with it, So.
Yeah, actually, like I said earlier, he did get away with everything he did.
Oh yeah. So what did you think about there is a character that I wanted to bring up. What did you think about the character of their cook or nanny or whatever growing up? I thought she was an interesting character as well, because she was listening in on the conversation with between him and his dad, and ultimately, she made a comment or two after they left in the taxi, and then later on, she evidently gave all the money that she had saved up for a divorce if she ever if she ever married.
Yeah, she was kind of a funny one, but I remember I was wondering who she was in the first place. Like she was there, but they never directly said how she was connected to the family. Like I wasn't sure if she was a relative or an employee or what.
Well, and it seems like the Bailey Buildings and Loans itself was a profitable thing for to help people get and own their own homes, and in what George had created as Bailey Park, which is apparently an extremely large amount of land that is helping a lot of people get you know get homes and get give lives to their families and stuff. One of them includes the Martini, Mr. Martini, who is a bar owner in town, and ultimately, I mean, George has offered um, several offers to get out of the situation that he's in. I mean, he could have if he wanted to. He could have taken up Sam Wainwright on his offer of getting into the ground floor in plastics. I mean, he could have taken Mr. Potter's 3-year contract, which was offered to him. I mean, basically, Potter was told that uh, George was winning. He was winning the war. He was winning with that with the Bailey Park and whatnot. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, when he heard that, he offered this contract to George, apparently to hire him, but if George had accepted, who knows what he would have done later. We didn't exactly get to know what he was planning to do after that.
Well, and he really sweetened the offer. I mean, he was really oozing some oil in his conversation, wasn't he? I mean, he was really slick in that conversation, don't you think? Don't you think that he was kind of a slick talker?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, he,
definitely.
I mean, he was all smiles. I mean, he was almost nice. I mean, you know, it was kind of an interesting. And Lionel Barrymore, he's had quite an interesting um, acting atmosphere. I mean, he was a silent film um, character. I mean, he started out in 1905.
Whoa.
And looks like he was a active actor during 1911, 1912, 1913, especially 1914, 15, 16. I mean, I'm not sure what. Oh, he was Billy Bones in Treasure Island in 1934. That I know, and he was in a bunch of Charles Dickens films. He was Dan Peggotty and David Copperfield, and see, the Devil Doll as Paul Levand, and Monsieur Duval in Camille, Disco and Captain Courageous. He was in quite a few. So he was a pirate at one point in time, I guess, in Treasure Island. But He was for quite some time in some films called Doctor Kildare, um, as in The Secret of Doctor Kildare, Kildare's Strange Case, Kildare Goes Home, Kildare's Crisis, Kildare's Wedding Day, Doctor Kildare's Victory. I mean, um, you know, and so on and so forth. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life was done in 1946, but this guy started in like 1905. That was quite a feat. So as far as uh, Jimmy Stewart, well, one of my other favorite films that I know that he was in is Harvey, where he stars beside a 6 foot tall bunny rabbit that he calls Harvey, and his name is Elwood P. Dowd in there. But he was also in quite a few Alfred Hitchcock films: Vertigo, Anatomy of a
Oh,
Murder, and I don't think that Anatomy of a Murder was an Alfred Hitchcock film, but Rear Window was. And I know that he was also in I think he was also in Rope, pretty sure. But he was in quite a few westerns too. I mean, he was in The Shootist, which was John Wayne's last film. Let's
oh,
see, Shenandoah. That one was a tragic one. That one was it was a I think it was a film where he played a father, and it was during like the end of the Civil War, and he lost like three of his sons or two of his
oh.
sons during the war. Played that kind of a character. Played Charlie. But yeah, he was in quite a few of those. Oh, he was in Bell Book and Candle. That one was a good one. The Spirit of St. Louis, which he played Charles Lindbergh, the man who flew the Spirit of St. Louis all the way around the world. Oh, that's right. He was in The Man Who Knew Too Much. That was another Alfred Hitchcock film. Yeah, he was quite the character player, at least during the Hitchcock years. But The Far Country. He played the Glenn Miller in the Glenn Miller story. Played the Glenn Miller was like the leader of one of the big band musicians. Also played Buttons a Clown in The Greatest Show on Earth. But there was a lot of films that he was in. The Philadelphia Story, The Shop Around the Corner, which was a film that I do believe that I believe if we had not had that one, we would not have You've Got Mail. I think Destiny Rides Again was another of his westerns that he was in that was pretty decent, and so on and so forth. So and Donna Reed, she was she was beautiful. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
let's see, Donna Reed. Let's look at her for a moment. So okay, so she was known. No, actually, she had a show between 1958 and 1966, but she was on Dallas for quite some years as Miss Ellie Ewing. Um, she was in From Here to Eternity as Elma or Lauren. But I guess let's see. She was in They Rode West, The Big Moment, Gun Fury, The Caddy, Raiders of the Seven Seas, The Trouble Along the Way, Hangman's Knot, Rainbow Around My Shoulder, Scandal Sheet, Saturday's Hero, Chicago Deadline, Beyond Glory, Green Dolphin Street, Faithful in My Fashion, They Were Expendable. Oh, she was in The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh,
Fascinating.
cool.
I don't know if you've heard of that film. Dorian Gray
I
was an interesting character based on an Oscar Wilde story.
I have heard a bit about it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, we'll have to check that out next year. Definitely. I mean, the Picture of Dorian Gray, that was a fascinating movie about a young man who got very obsessed with a portrait of himself. So obsessed that the portrait would consume his every evil deeds.
Oh,
And
interesting.
he kind of was like in between like Jekyll and Hyde kind of a character. At least it reminded me of him a little bit. But in any case, other than that let's see. Oh, I can't help but maybe even talk about Clarence once I get his name here. Clarence, he was a
Oh,
character.
yeah.
Clarence was played by Henry Travers, and Travers was in a whole heck of a lot too. He was in Shadow of a Doubt, which is also a Alfred Hitchcock movie. He was in the original The Invisible Man as Dr. Cranley. He was in Mrs. Miniver as Mr. Ballard. That was in 1942. And he has been in films since 1933. Let's see. Death Takes a Holiday, Born to be Bad, The Party's Over, Ready for Love, Maybe It's Love, After Office Hours, Captain Hurricane, For Hours to Kill, Escapade, Pursuit, Seven Keys to a Bald Plate, Too Many Parents, The Sisters, You Can't Get Away with Murder. I know that one. That one's with a Humphrey Bogart, earlier Humphrey Bogart film. He plays some guy who I think was in San Quentin or something like that, and gets out somehow. Let's see. Dark Victory, On Borrowed Time, Stanley Livingston, The Rains Came, Primrose Path, Edison the Man, Ben Else, he plays. Anne of Windy Poppers, Wyoming, High Sierra, a Girl, a Guy, and a Gob. I've heard of that one. The Bad Man, I'll Wait for You, Ball of Fire, Mrs. Miniver, which I've already mentioned. Pierre of the Plains, Random Harvest, there's The Shadow of a Doubt. That was in 1943. Madame Curie, Dragon Seed, interesting name. The Very Thought of You, Thrill of a Romance, The Naughty 90s. The Naughty 90s, that is an Abbott and Costello film. He worked with Bud Abbott and Lou Costello. Sweet. Abbott! You know who Bud Abbott and Lou Costello were?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the name? I had another glitch.
Do you know who Bud Abbott and Lou Costello were?
I'm not sure.
They're the ones who came up with the famous "Who's on first, what's on second, and I don't know is on third" routine.
Oh,
What are you talking about? What's on second? Who's on second? Who's on first? What are you talking about? What's on second? I don't know. Third base. You'll have to see it. It's kind of cool. It's a baseball routine that they do.
oh.
And every player has a different name. Who's on second? What's on? Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know. Who's on third? You have to look it up on YouTube. I know they've got to have it there. I guess he was in the Yearling and the Bells of St. Mary's, which I still have to get. The Flame, The Accused. I thought he was in another movie that I thought. I guess not. I'll have to figure out who was in there then, because one of my earlier Criterion collection pickups. It was a film called I Married a Witch, and I thought that he was in it, but
that sounds.
Married a Witch. Just want to see who that old man might have been. Just seeing. Okay, might have been Friedrich March. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Anyways, but ultimately, James Stewart, his character George Bailey, he gets really down in his luck because not only did Uncle Billy he lost $8,000 inside that newspaper, and that's a lot of money for this time period. And if they can't account for the money, then they could both possibly go to jail. So George gets really upset at everyone around him, not just Uncle Billy. And he's at a loss as to what happened because he doesn't remember that he accidentally lost it in that newspaper. That I mean, he doesn't remember, and he's an older man. He just doesn't know what to tell George. So he ends up going home, and his wife is getting the tree in order for Christmas. You can tell it's a holiday time because the kids are well. Janie, she is practicing her piano, and little kids. And I didn't realize this. He had 4 kids. 4 kids. How the hell did he have all them little changelings over time? It's like when did Mary pop them out?
Yeah, I guess we didn't get to see it all.
Well, in any case, so ultimately, I think that the moment where I always tear up, and I did today, is when he goes and picks up his youngest son, and he's holding him, and he begins to cry himself, and he doesn't say anything as he walks in, and she's trying to talk to him about things, and it's apparent that something is wrong, but he says nothing is wrong, but something is, and he just keeps getting more upset as the time goes. What do you think about this moment?
Well, I must say that's a very impacting moment and one that can really show people what it means to be a family person. If you are a person with a wife or husband and children, then no matter what happens to difficulties you're dealing with, you're still supposed to have the time and patience for your family, especially for children who don't understand the struggles of the adults. So, yeah, that's a moment where you can see how much effort it takes to be a family man.
Well, yeah, the kids they're asking all kinds of questions, and they don't just know what what happened during their father's day. They're used to being able to talk to their father. So when he gets all angry at them, and this means all of them. I mean, he literally snaps at each one, and then he destroys like all of the models that he had. That I mean, there was a bridge, and there was something else that was there. I didn't quite see, but I can tell that that is his work area. That is like what he does when he comes home. He goes and models these things that he can never build himself. You know, that he had in his
Mm.
mind as he was growing up, or these are his dreams that he's destroying.
Oh
That
yeah.
and his family sees all of this. His family sees that he's struggling, and he apologizes afterwards. And of course, he ends up walking out of the home to get some steam. But at that point in time, it's like he's hit rock bottom. You know, he doesn't know who to turn to, and who does he turn to? Mr. Potter.
Uh, oh yeah, yeah.
He doesn't think he has anyone else to turn to at this moment, and he's at a shitty moment in his life. And Potter just he's uberly cruel because he'd given him a chance to be part of his empire or whatnot, and he'd already insulted him twice. So he basically told him, "Here, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to do the right thing." I've still got the bank examiner here. We'll have him serve you some papers. How about that for a Merry Christmas? Bah humbug kind of a thing. So,
Mm.
which was actually not just a statement; it was a movement. The bah humbug bug. uh,
Definitely.
I mean, if you went to someone for help and they didn't give it to you, um, it would depend on what kind of a person a person might be. And if they don't, I mean, as long as it's not money and it's easy to do, you know, if they just need some help to get something, like if you see an old lady cross the street and she's got some groceries, of course you're going to offer her your assistance, your help. But in this day and age, with masked people around, I don't know. But uh, in any case, the point is, you know, uh, you have to be nice to people. And Potter wasn't. He basically Lee was coming to him as a last minute resort, and he has nowhere else to go. So he goes to the bar, and what does he end up doing?
Oh, yeah, there is a moment when he starts praying to God for help, but then what happens is he runs into the husband of this school teacher he had insulted over the phone,
Yeah,
and yeah,
he
that guy punches him in the face.
yeah. Well, he did kind of deserve it in a way because he did overreact to little Zuzu and her sickness or whatnot. It was just a cold that she had come home with, and he overreacted because of how angry he was at the situation. But unfortunately, he went too far, and I think that was just part of the whole downward cycle of. And he really started believing those words that Potter had said. You're worth more dead than alive. Uh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, when you're going to someone for help and he says those words to you, you're worth more dead than alive. I mean, what do you start thinking? I mean, you start thinking, well, maybe I should be, maybe I am more worth more dead than alive. And then he goes even further. I wish I had never been born.
Uh,
So
yeah, well, interesting.
go
Yes.
ahead. Go ahead. You were going to
Oh,
say?
yeah, I was going to say that moment when he says he wishes he was never born. I find it quite interesting that it's mentioned in the synopsis when it actually happens quite late into the movie. So much that I'd say the synopsis kind of spoils it in a way.
Uh, in a sense, but ultimately, a man. Well, he sees a man jump into the to this freezing lake over this bridge, and which he had just prayed to shortly before that. And he thought that the answer to his prayer was the punch to
The
his punch to knock his block off, but it was in fact to jump in to save this man who had jumped into the lake. Well, Clarence says it was him who was saving him because he was already thinking about jumping before he, you know, at least that's the instance that you think that is going to happen. You know, you think that George might have actually thought of suicide. You know, but
uh,
we don't do that in Bedford Falls. We just don't. Uh, what did you think about that guy who pulled them out of the lake and his reaction to Clarence?
uh, Uh, well, actually, that's a pretty well thought out scene. It kind of makes us wonder if we were in such a bad place that we are contemplating suicide, and just in a moment when we are thinking whether to do it or not, like standing on the bridge and thinking whether to jump or not. And then in such a moment, we suddenly find ourselves in a situation of being able to save another person's life. And we would probably do it, and it would probably make us reconsider the whole idea of ending our own life after something like that. So I found that scene quite interesting for that.
Or, as Shakespeare would have said, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them to die to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end. The heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, to perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. But in any case, once he wishes that he had never been born, Clarence thought to himself was like, "Hey, there's an idea. What do you think, Joseph? All right, you've never been born.
Yeah.
They're not there. Well, what are you talking about? Zeus's petals. They're not there. And your lips not bleeding, George. What do you say? What do you? What do you know? Things are getting strange here."
Yeah, like he puts him in some kind of an alternate universe where he never existed.
Correct. And this is kind of like the moment of reveal. I mean, what would life be like without George Bailey? Not unlike what would life be like without James Hook. Oops, wrong movie. But anyways, um, yeah. So he thinks they need a couple of drinks, so he goes over to martinis. Well, wait a minute. It doesn't say martinis on it. What does it say?
Nix, I think.
Yep, and Nick just so happens to be the bartender that was martinis. in that other universe or whatnot, where George Bailey was actually in it. Whereas Nick now owns it, and he's a schmuck. I mean, he literally throws both of them out once. He hears all that angel talk, and every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. So once he throws them out, he's got a line there as saying, "Look, every time I do this, an angel gets its wings." But here's the thing. While they're there, George gets to see Mr. Gower, his first employer, show up, and he looks like what the cat dragged in. I mean, he really looks like he's down on his luck bum. I mean, and they ask him if he knows who George Bailey is, and he's like, no. And the way that they act towards him is they spray a bunch of liquor at him. I mean, and the thing is, Nick has said that he poisoned a kid 20 years ago, and he went to jail for it. If you really think that you're his kind of friend or anything like that, then you must be some kind of criminal too.
Yeah, that's a moment when George, he doesn't quite start believing it, but yeah, that's when things get strange, which makes us as audience realize what's really going on.
Well, and this is the Mr. Gower that ultimately bought him his first suitcase to get the hell out of Dodge. Get the hell out of it was a going away present. It had his name on it and everything. It's this nice little suitcase that evidently he put in an order for him. And I like the fact that George Bailey, every time he came into his shop, he pulled that lighter down and said, "Hot dog."
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the next thing that happens? I mean, the next thing that happens is what?
Well, I remember he was running into all the characters we met earlier, and no one was recognizing him. But which one was next? Let me think.
Well, from there, he went to try to find his car.
Oh yeah,
Wait, no, that was before that. He went to try to find his car, and it wasn't there. And apparently, it was the oldest tree in town, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Because he'd made a dent in it before, but his car wasn't there. So after that, did he? Oh, that's right. He went home, and he was doing it alone.
Before he went home, didn't he meet some other people, the taxi driver and?
That's right. He ran into Violet as she was being kicked out of a cat house, and she looked like she also looked like something the cat dragged in, like someone had beaten her to a fucking pulp, and basically her hair was all of a mess. She was fighting them, and she didn't know who he was, and so he went over to Ernie, called him by name, and he started to talk about his wife, and when he said that she left him years ago, he took him to the place that he thought was home, and the place was all cobwebbed and empty and shit like that. What would you have done?
Well, I would probably start questioning my sanity.
Right? and he's starting to look around, and he gets after he realizes that um well, and Clarence does a little disappearing act from Ernie and Bert, which you kind of laughed at those two because of their names. Maybe they got their name. Maybe Ernie and Bert got their namesake from those two. You never
Uh,
know.
yeah, actually, I read a bit about that. Apparently, many people were asking about it, but it was they said it was a coincidence, supposedly. But yeah, who knows?
Hey, hey, Bert, what are you doing, Bert?
Oh wow, nice impersonation. uh,
What do you think of this, Bert? Anyways,
uh, yeah, well, one sketch with them that I'll never forget is the one in the Egyptian pyramid. If you remember that one.
oh yeah, I remember that one. Anyways, going forwards with this, ultimately, Ernie thinks he needs a drink after seeing Clarence disappear, and you get a crazed look at at this moment where it's like every place he turns to. Actually, it's after this because he goes over to his mom's place, and evidently she runs a border house or a room and board kind of a place, and
Oh
she doesn't
yeah.
know who he is, and he's like, I thought you would have known who I was at least. And once he leaves from there, that's when he gets that crazed look, like, who the fuck do I turn to? What the hell is happening? Why doesn't anyone know who I am? I mean, I'm George Bailey. Hello, you know, I'm. Anyways, so he evidently calls the Clarence to go to the cemetery, and he demands to know where Mary is, his wife, at least the one who he thought was his wife, and he's like, I'm not supposed to tell you. Um, she ended up being an old maid, a spinster. Oh, right now she's supposedly closing down the library. You'll never get to her. So he tracks down Mary, finds her, and starts to follow her. And a whole crowd amasses towards him. Bert comes around. He hits Bert, and then he goes on a run from the crowd and goes to the same bridge. And he's like, Clarence, Clarence, help me, Clarence.
Oh
Help me.
yeah. Then he is sent back to his normal life.
Well, he basically asks God to give him back his life. I mean, he wants to live. I want to live again. I want to live again. So, um, it starts to snow. His lip starts to bleed. He finds his little daughter's petals inside his pocket, and Bert recognizes him. So, and it tells him he's been looking all over town for him. Really, Bert? Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, you Bedford Falls! Merry Christmas, you Emporium Beautiful you! Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter! What do you think about that scene?
Well, it was pretty funny, especially when he got home and there were those people who were supposed to arrest him. It kind of made me wonder what would happen in real life if, like, police came to someone's place to arrest that person and that person suddenly showed up like, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Well, hello, Mr. Bank Inspector. Isn't it great? I'm going to jail. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
And then his kids call down to him. And I think this is a cute little moment because he hugs his kids, and a little Zuzu comes out, and she's like, "Daddy, Daddy, it just went away. All of a sudden, I wasn't sick anymore. And he's like,
Yeah.
really? And then where's Mary? Where's Mary? And she comes, and then everybody comes, and it's apparent that she's called everyone in town, anyone who he's helped out in the past, and they were all willing to help him out of his run, you know. And it seems like the helping hand really meant something to these people in his life. Even the guy who asked for $242 at the time of the concession, the depression, you know. And it seems like everybody banded together. Even his friend, Hee Haw, Sam Wayne, called and said he was given $25,000, and that's on top of the heaps of money that you saw on on the table. And I think I have to mention the Tom Sawyer book too, because that Tom Sawyer book was Clarence's book that he carried around, and Clarence evidently before he left gave him that book with a little message. Thanks for the wings. And of course, in comes Zuzu chiming in with the bell. Look, Daddy, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. And he's like, that's right. Is that a boy, Clarence?
Yeah, uh, that's a pretty interesting way to uh, put all those things together in that scene. At the moment when the girl said it without knowing that it actually came true, we find out that an actual angel character really got his wings at that moment.
Oh yeah. And I think this was an interesting time too, because at this point in time in 1946, I'm sure that people were a lot more Christian by nature, and this was kind of a feel-good movie. And what's interesting is that this film at the time had mixed reviews, and the box office, it was a flop at the box office. Um,
Oh,
but ultimately, ultimately, this film ended up getting, what was it? It is considered one of the greatest films of all time. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including
whoa.
Best Picture, and has been recognized by the American Film Institute as one of the 100 best films ever made. It was number 11 on the American Film Institute's 1998 greatest movie list, and number 20 on its 2007 greatest movie list, and number 1 on its list of the most inspirational American films of all time. Capra revealed that it was his favorite among the films he directed, and that he screened it for family every Christmas season. In 1990, the film was designated as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, and added to the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress. So, um, what did you think about the practical effects of the movie? I mean, there were really no special effects. Everything was just kind of more hands-on, at least that I saw.
Cool. Well, yeah, except maybe the beginning with the stars. Uh, with those stars blinking when Clarence was supposedly talking to Joseph and God.
Yeah.
And oh, what else?
Well, apparently this was rated PG for thematic elements like smoking and some violence.
Wow.
uh,
Well,
some violence? What?
uh, yeah, well, aside from some punches in the face and so on, there wasn't really that much violence. I have seen much worse.
So evidently, the film was colorized 3 times. The first colorized version of the film was produced by Hal Roach Studios, now Sonar Entertainment. The second by Republic Pictures, and then apparently a third colorization of the film was produced by Legend Films for Paramount, the film's current copyright holder in 2007. So
Huh.
let's see. What else? I'm just looking real quick, seeing if it tells me. Okay, so it was produced by Liberty Films. Okay, the filming locations were in California. Okay, RKO Encino Ranch, uh, and Balboa Boulevard and Burbank Boulevard in Encino, Los Angeles, was the studio set of Bedford Falls Town. 4587 Vera Road, La Canada, Flint Ridge, California was the exterior of Martini's house. Um, Beverly Hills High School on 241 Moreno Drive in Beverly Hills, California, was the Christian dance contest. Moving gymnasium floor over swimming pool. RKO Path Studios, 9336 Washington Boulevard, Culver City, California. That is the indoor studio where Harry Bailey calls George Bailey after returning from World War II. Beverly Hills is where the high school dance location was. Lesson, okay. USA was the entire film, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the filming locations. Um, okay. Let's see. What about the music? Okay. So uh, the music was definitely interesting of its time. We've got Buffalo Gal Won't You Come Out Tonight, which was originally
Mm.
written by William Cool White. Then we got Odest Fidelis, O Come All Ye Faithful, which was attributed to John Reading at the time. Then we had Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, which was a traditional song. Then, of course, during the dance over the pool, we had the Charleston, which was from 1923. The music was by James P. Johnson. Then we had My Wild Irish Rose, which was sung by Uncle Billy, drunk as a fish. Written by Chauncey Olcott and performed by Thomas Mitchell. Then we have Avalon from 1920, which the music was by Vincent Rose, which was based on El Lucavan L'Estelle from the opera Tosca by Giacomo Puccini. And then we had the Wedding March, which is apparently from 1843. Well, this is the traditional wedding march, but this particular one is from A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was written by Felix Mendelssohn. Then we have The Stars and Stripes Forever, which was written in 1897, which I believe might have been the music that you might have heard during the war bond times or all that jazz. It was written by John Philip Sousa, performed by George Tilley and Eustace. Song of the Islands, which was written by Charles E. King. I Love You Truly, which was sung by Ernie and Bert outside the old decrepit hotel that eventually became their home. Was written by Carrie Jacobs Bond and performed by Ward Bond and Frank Phelan. This is the Army, Mr. Jones. written by Irving Berlin in 1943. When Johnny Comes Marching Home, which was written in 1863, and the music was by Louis Lambert. Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which was published first in 1856. The music was by Felix Mendelssohn. Hymn by Charles Wesley, and Felix was in 1840, Wesley in 1730, and this was performed by Carol Combs. Vieni Vieni, written in 1884, music by Vincent Scotto, lyrics by Henry Varna and George Coker. King Porter Stomp, which was written by Ferdinand Jelly Roll Martin. Auld Lang Syne, which was written in 1788, possibly the oldest song here, with the words by Robert Burns. Ol Sol Mio, which was written by Edward de Capua, and The Best Things in Life Are Free. Music by Ray Henderson. Lyrics by Buddy G. DeSilva and Lou Brown. And
Oh yeah.
I guess I want to, before we, what did you think of the music to it all? Did you think that it went with?
Well, yeah, I definitely did. It was pretty good, and some of the songs I was already familiar with from some other movies. But yeah, it was pretty good.
All right, and I think we should end this um, uh, discussion with the words to Auld Lang Syne. Should auld acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should auld acquaintance be forgot and days of Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for days of Auld Lang Syne. We twa hae run about the braes and put the goings fine. But we've wandered, did mony a weary fit, sin days of Auld Lang Syne. We twa have pelted the burn, fra morning sun till dine. But seas between us braid, hae roared, sin days of Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet, for days of Auld Lang Syne. And surely ye'll be your pint stop, and surely I'll be mine, and we'll take a cup of kindness yet, for Auld Lang Syne. And there's a hand, my trusty fear, and gives a hand o' thine, and we'll take a right good willy what, for Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet, for Auld Lang Syne. And repeated words of same. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this discussion, or do you think that you've said what you needed to say?
Well, I'm not sure. I think we have mentioned everything I was going to say. Nothing else comes to my mind. Wait. Only one thing I remembered. When you told me we were going to discuss this movie, and when you mentioned this part where George wishes he was never born, it made me realize I had seen a spoof of that story in the Annoying Orange web series. A few years ago, there was a Christmas episode called Wishful Thinking. It can still be found on YouTube. I remembered I really liked that episode, although I didn't even know that it was a spoof of a movie, but now I know, so that was pretty interesting to notice.
Well, it's not surprising that it would have that kind of a um, that kind of an impact on later, shows and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure that even The Simpsons or South Park have even mimicked or imitated George Bailey on the bridge or something like that. I seem to remember something similar where Homer actually has a day where he wishes he wasn't born or something like
Yeah,
that. But in any case, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, you had an interesting time. Maybe
yeah,
you can take
thank you
this.
all.
Maybe you can take this as a guideline to seeing the film if you have not seen it. It is a great film to watch around the holidays. You don't have to be any kind of a Christian or anything to understand, the story or get into the
Yeah,
characters. And
definitely.
it was an enjoyable movie for me. I enjoyed the characters. I absolutely love this movie. I mean, you can tell that I like this movie because I remember bits and pieces by heart. So,
Definitely.
but in any case, Merry Christmas, everyone. I know we still have maybe 4 more days till Christmas, and then maybe we'll take 2 weeks off, and and then we'll go into next year with a light heart, you know. Maybe go into a year with uh, uh, some good ideas about what we can start the new year with, especially since 2020 can just be scrapped and we can take it all back.
Uh, Definitely. I just wish it would really end with 2020.
I hope so, but you never know. I mean, it's going to be a rough road ahead. I think it'll be get worse before it gets better. But in any case, it's a wonderful life. It really is. Enjoy and enjoy the rest of your life as I will.
Indeed.